I'm Emma, and I will be your teacher today. Let's learn about creative problem solving. The world is constantly growing. As time goes by, surely there will be new things in it that are also accompanied by new challenges and threats. They may not be the same as before. As the future agent of change, we must be ready to face it. Creative problem solving helps us to face the current and future challenges. Let's say your boss just scolded you. He does not satisfied with your words. He said the solution you gave was not effective to implement because it was way too narrow and you pay attention to one perspective only, even though you believe it is the best solution that you have thought of. This case means that you are trapped in conceptual blocks. Let me explain. Conceptual blocks are mental obstacles that constrain the way problems are defined, and they can inhibit us from being effective in any of the four types of creativity. Conceptual blocks limit the number of alternative solutions that people think about. There are four types of it, which are constancy, commitment, compression, and complacency. Constancy. It occurs when individuals become bounded to one way of looking at a problem or using one approach to define, describe, or solve it. Two types of constancy are vertical thinking and one thinking language. Vertical thinking. It happens when you only define a problem in only one way without considering alternative views. Spencer at 3M wanted to create a strong glue. He began with, how can I get an adhesive that has a stronger bond? But later on, he didn't find the answer. So he changed his definition to, how can I create a product by applying an adhesive that doesn't stick firmly? And then boom! Post-it that has a weak adhesive bond has born. One thinking language. It happens when you only use not more than one language to define and assess a problem. However, there are other thinking languages such as nonverbal or symbolic languages like mathematics, sensory imagery like smelling or tactile sensation, feelings and emotion like happiness, fear, or anger, and visual imagery like mental pictures. The more languages available to problem solver, the better and more creative will be their solutions. Art Fry, a scientist in 3M, had heard about Spencer's unsticky glue. One day, while singing in a church in St. Paul, Minnesota, Fry was playing around with the slips of paper that marked the various hymns in his book. Suddenly, a visual image popped into his mind. He thought that it would be a good idea to apply Spencer's adhesive as bookmarks. Then the adhesive bookmark was born. This is one example of the visual imagery thinking language. Commitment. Commitment happens when an individual becomes committed to a particular point of view, definition, or solution. It is likely that they will follow through on that commitment. Two types of commitment are stereotyping based on the past experience and ignoring commonalities. Stereotyping based on the past experience. This happens when the presented problems are seen only as the variation of past problems. The creation of post-it notes provide an example of overcoming stereotyping based on past experiences. Spencer and 3M describe his invention in terms of breaking stereotypes based on past experience. The key to the post-it adhesive was doing the experiment. If I had sat down and factored it out beforehand and thought about it, I wouldn't have done the experiment. If I had really seriously cracked the books and gone through the literature, I would have stopped. The literature was full of examples that said you can do this. Ignoring commonalities. It's when you fail to interpret commonalities among elements that initially appear to be different. This is among the most commonly identified blocks to creativity. It means that a person becomes committed to a particular point of view, to the fact that elements are different, and consequently becomes unable to make connection, identify themes, or perceive commonalities. The discovery of penicillin by Sir Alexander Fleming resulted from his seeing a common theme among seemingly unrelated events. Fleming was working with some cultures of Staphylococcus that had accidentally become contaminated. The contamination, a growth of fungi, an isolated cluster of the Staphylococcus, led Fleming to see a relationship no one else had ever seen before, and thus to discover a wonder drug. Compression. Compression of ideas is looking too narrowly at a problem, screening out too much relevant data, and making assumptions that inhibit problem solution. Two especially strong examples of compression are artificially constraining problems and not distinguishing figure from ground. Artificially constrained. Artificially constraining problems is the act of defining the boundaries of a problem too narrowly. Sometimes, people place boundaries around problems or constrain their approach to them in such a way that the problems become impossible to solve. Creative problem solving requires looking at the big picture, considering all relevant information about the problem, and ensuring that a variety of possible solutions are examined. Back to Spensilver, he had to add complexity to overcome compression in order to find suitable application for his product. Because the glue had failed every traditional 3M test for adhesive, it was categorized as a useless configuration of chemicals. The potential for the product was artificially constrained by traditional assumption about adhesive that a more stickiness and stronger bonding is the best. It was later on discovered some unconventional application such as a better bookmark and post-it as a replacement for 3A main product tape. Separating figures from ground. Separating figures from ground is an act of not filtering out irrelevant information or finding needed information. Problems almost never come clearly specified, so problem solvers must determine what the real problem is. They must filter out inaccurate, misleading, or irrelevant information in order to define the problem correctly and generate appropriate alternative solutions. George Forstner's contribution to the development and manufacture of the microwave oven was to separate out all the irrelevant complexity that constrained others. Whereas the magnetron was a device so complicated that few people understood it, Forstner focused on its basic raw material, its size, and its functionality. By comparing it to an air conditioner, he eliminated much of the complexity and mystery. He had seen what all the researchers had failed to see. Complacency. Complacency is a conceptual block that occurs because of fear, ignorance, insecurity, or just plain mental laziness. Two especially prevalent examples of the complacency block are non-inquisitiveness and a bias against thinking. Non-inquisitiveness. Sometimes, the inability to solve problems results from an unwillingness to ask questions, obtain information, or search for data. People tend to think that by asking questions or redefining a problem will make them appear naive or ignorant. This makes it difficult to implement creative problem solving because a lack of questioning can make the analysis less critical and lacks perspective. Spensilver at 3M said that he was always excited when looking for new properties in materials. He enjoyed experimenting to discover new things. However, he found it difficult talking people into doing that. Based on his experience, most people are reluctant just to try, to experiment, and to see what will happen. When someone in an office room is seen staring out the window for a long time and not doing anything, people will think that the person is daydreaming. In reality, that person is not daydreaming. He is thinking about the ways to solve the problem in his business while staring out of the window. This indicates that thinking is still considered less significant than action.